In the East Midlands, the government moves to boost social mobility in some of the poorest parts of our region. But will it work?
We have dreams. All of us have dreams. You have dreams as well. Do you know what I mean? I have dreams. But it's about having the right people around you, having provision, and that comes through knowing what you want to do.
And problems at the doctors, a shortage of GPs and a shortage of cash. And in part of the region, threats to end some routine services unless there's more funding.
Whilst we're finding it difficult to provide safe care to our patients for the things we have to do, we will have to stop at some point doing those things which we don't have to do.
Hello, I'm Mari Ashby, and my guest this week, Mark Spencer, is the Conservative MP for Sherwood in Nottinghamshire, and John Ashworth is Labour's MP for Leicester South, who's just been made Shadow Health Secretary in Jeremy Corbyn's reshuffle. First, the rush to fracking here in the East Midlands may have stalled, but elsewhere in the country, it's racing ahead.
The earth is our mother.
There was a lively protest outside Nottinghamshire County Council this week as demonstrators opposed an application to begin exploratory drilling to assess the potential for fracking in the north of the county. A decision on the plan was postponed, but villagers fear the government's move to force Lancashire County Council to accept fracking means the same could happen here.
It's a very controversial embryonic industry in the UK. They've just brought the offshore industry onshore, and our concern is this isn't a well that's 200 miles offshore. These are going to be 200 metres from people's homes, not just here, but everywhere.
So, Mark Spencer, Nottinghamshire County Council is still considering this application, but elsewhere, your government has just overruled another council in Lancashire to say that fracking can go ahead there. So much for local democracy and devolution.
Yeah, I think the government's clearly got an obligation to make sure we've got enough energy as a nation, and I'd rather have fracking in the UK than be reliant on Mr Putin to supply us with gas in the future. And I think, we all want cheap energy bills. We all want to be able to turn our hot water taps on and our gas boilers heat our water for us. So we've got to find a way of securing the nation's energy.
What about those people that you saw in our film and the clip of the lady there who lives in Mist and who's very worried about having it opposite their homes?
Of course. So I understand their concerns. I mean, what I would say is that this is going to be the most regulated industry that there is in the UK. We're going to have inspectors crawling all over it. And actually, we're not talking about people just setting up rigs and having a go at this. These are professional international companies that are going to be regulated by the Environment Agency to make sure that it works and it's safe.
OK, well, Labour are officially against fracking, John Ashworth, but Nottinghamshire County Council is a Labour authority, and this application had been recommended for approval before it was postponed. So what is the policy exactly?
Well, the National Labour Party has called for a moratorium on fracking. We are concerned about the environmental impacts of fracking. We think there needs to be more research done into the environmental implications. So that's why the Labour Party 2 weeks ago at its conference announced that we would no longer support fracking applications. But I mean, what Nottinghamshire Labour County Group do is a matter for them, because we believe in localism, we believe in local Labour groups making their own decision. But I suspect what's going to happen in the end is the government are going to step in and tell the people of North Nottinghamshire they're going to have fracking like they have done in Lancashire. Well,
the company behind the application, iGas, have actually pointed out that this would be going ahead in North Nottinghamshire, as we know, and it's an area that's used to mining and where they've already been drilling for oil. Does that make a difference?
Well, I mean, that's why a lot of people are even more concerned, because they're worried about what this could mean to the land. I mean, parts of Nottinghamshire have, significant problems with flooding, particularly in parts of Sherwood, as Mark will know. I mean, people have got all kinds of concerns about the environmental impact of this. We're just saying we need more research. We need more understanding of it before going ahead.
OK. Well, next is opportunity about to knock for people in Derby. The government's chosen it as one of 6 places in the country for an initiative aimed at breaking down barriers to people from disadvantaged backgrounds. But what will it look like on the ground? Peter Saull has been to one project already up and running in Leicester that's expected to be replicated in Derby.
You've got different people coming from different countries. It could be outside Europe.
In multicultural Leicester, they're discussing what it means to be British.
Okay. So colonial Britain plays a part in Britishness. Yes?
But it's not the question nor the answer that matters. These young people have had few advantages in life, and being encouraged to express themselves can boost their confidence.
Religion
is one.
19-year-old Tawanda Majuru is a big success story.
I didn't believe that I was intelligent before. But I wrote my first exam, got 98%. So from there I was like, okay, cool, 2020 is a cool place. They can bring that out of me. then yeah, I'm staying here. I think Britain's a cultural place. It's a cultural home.
Tuanda believes that while his contemporaries dream big, they often don't have the means to make it happen.
We have dreams. All of us have dreams. You have dreams as well. Do you know what I mean? I have dreams. But it's about having the right people around you, having provision, and that comes through knowing what you want to do. Do you know what I mean? And they know what to want to do, but there's no provision. So I feel like, yeah, my friends do have big dreams, but there's no provision.
This is Theresa May's vision for a Britain that, in her words, works for everyone and not just the privileged few. Her government's announced funding for 10 social mobility cold spots, including just up the road in Derby, to help pay for schemes like this.
Our approach will be tailored to each area's needs. And that's how we'll really make a difference, and that's what opportunity areas will do. It's going to take teachers and schools, communities, and it's going to take business.
Provisions, not just this one, but like these is invaluable because there is a gap and it really needs to be filled. And I think that the burden on mainstream education to fill it is unfair, it's unrealistic. So I think we can't value it enough.
I could be grounded because I've seen results.
2020 works across the East Midlands, and more young people in Derby are now set to benefit. But unions point out that many of these areas have suffered because of government cutbacks. The Prime Minister says she's committed to improving social mobility, and while schemes like this help, it'll take years before we can judge her on actions rather than words.
Well, joining us now from London is Claudia Harris, the Chief Executive of the Careers and Enterprise Company, which is going to help run this new scheme in Derby. Claudia, Justine Greening was a little vague on the detail on this. How will it work exactly?
Well, you just heard from 2020 about these life-shaping experiences that can really help young people to get ready for the world of work, understand the opportunities that are out there, realise their dreams, I think is what the young people said. And what we're doing is we're going to make a fund available to scale up programmes like 2020 across the opportunity areas, including Derby, so that many, many more young people can have these sorts of experiences that really help to connect them to the world of work and get them ready for their careers.
Why Derby in particular?
So Derby was identified by the Social Mobility Commission as an area of so low social mobility, and they looked at a range of factors. They looked at performance in Key Stage 2, performance in Key Stage 3 exams, they looked at progression into work, and they looked in particular at those results for the most disadvantaged, and that's how they identified these opportunity areas.
OK, well, we do have other disadvantaged areas here in the East Midlands, sad to say. Will it be rolled out across other areas as well?
Well, at the Careers and Enterprise Company, which is the organisation that I run, we have been set up to inspire and prepare young people for the world of work across England. And actually, we're working across the East Midlands. As you say, we fund 2020 in other parts of the area. And what we're doing in the other parts of the country is we've set up a network of coordinators to connect schools and businesses, and also to fund organisations such as 2020 and others to create these life-shaping experiences. And what this funding will do is it will allow us to create even more of those experiences in areas like Derby, in the opportunity areas, so that all young people in Derby and in the 10 other opportunity areas can have these encounters with the world of work.
OK, Claudia. So from what Claudia is saying, it's an opportunity, John, that's to be welcomed for people who wouldn't normally get it. Is something that you welcome?
Oh, yeah, it sounds like a really good initiative. And of course, we're not going to be churlish about it. If the government are going to put extra money into some of these areas which suffer from deprivation, that is a good thing. But of course, you've got to remember the broader context. We've seen huge cuts to local government. We've seen the connection service axed. So a lot of the services that were there in the first place have been taken away. But of course, we're going to welcome something like this. But you've got to remember the bigger picture. Huge cuts to a lot of services that young people rely on.
And against that, what you're just saying, the unions are saying that it's just a drop in the ocean, this money.
I mean, this is a real opportunity to try and give some aspiration to some of these communities. And at the moment, we're selecting people via postcode. If you're wealthy enough to own a very nice house in a nice area, you get many more opportunities. And I think this is a great way of giving young people the ability to talk to other people in a career and look at their career path. So someone can say, look, these are the GCSEs I did, these are the A-levels I did, this is the career which I took and how I got there. Now, even if they don't want to pursue the same career, at least it gets them thinking about their own careers and their own path to finding a way of supporting their own families in the future.
Is this the Tories moving into territory that's normally Labour territory? Social mobility is something normally you'd be pushing for.
The Tories talk about social mobility is a joke. They're talking about bringing back grammar schools, one of the most regressive, divisive policies you can think of. I mean, we're going back to the 50s where we say to 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds, sorry, you're the clever kid, you can go to a grammar school and you're the failure. I mean, this initiative's great, but look at the bigger picture. That's not social mobility.
Of course, there are always people who are more academic than others, and if you are an academic person, then you need to be supported through that so you can go on and do a great academic career. If you're not, if you're more sort of hands-on and that sort of skill, then you need the support to go a different path through apprenticeships or those sorts of career routes.
Why create opportunity areas like this? Why hasn't this been happening until now? Why have we had to wait this long?
I mean, to be fair, it is happening in other areas as well. You know, in two schools I've got in my patch, in the Dukeries College in Ollerton, they're working really closely with employers to give people the aspiration and those sort of career paths. Joseph Whittaker in Rainworth.
Funding for career services, didn't you? And under the coalition government,
of course, there's been financial
services
pressure. You know, we've been recovering from that economic disaster we inherited. Now, luckily, we've been able to work on the economy, and more cash is coming forward, and we need to start and build for the future and make sure those opportunities are for everybody across society.
My wife went to the same comprehensive school as Mark, and I think my father-in-law might have even taught you at that comprehensive school. I think he taught your sister anyway. You know, that's what we need: comprehensive education, giving the best to every single child, not dividing them at 11.
But isn't this just a new way of thinking? And in these cold spots, maybe this is the way forward for that new way of thinking.
Well, this initiative's great. But, you know, I'm not ever going to come on here and support grammar schools, which is what the big education initiative Theresa May's talking about, bringing back the 11 plus, dividing children and branding thousands of children a failure. I mean, that is regressive, it's divisive, and it doesn't help social mobility.
It's actually a really small part of this whole aspiration and ability to give opportunities to all. It's actually a really small part of the package.
And we're talking about social mobility. Claudia Harris in London, you've been hearing what the politicians have had to say on this. So what happens next, and when will we actually see this in operation in Derby?
Yeah. So we're going to get going straight away. We will make the funding available before the end of the year. We'll look for applicants to bid. And in the new year, you'll start to see these programmes rolling out and more young people connecting to the world of work, having these life-shaping experiences, work experience, volunteering, opportunities to do mentoring. And the results, I hope, will follow very quickly after that.
And how will you be monitoring those results? When will we know what the results are?
You see the impact almost immediately, as you could see from the clip you showed, in terms of confidence and self-belief and results in terms of moving into employment. And we will be measuring all of that very, very carefully. And over the long term, what you will look to see is improvements in social mobility in Derby.
OK, well, Claudia Harris, thank you very much indeed for joining us from London.
Thank you very much.
Now, the government announced this week that it's going to increase the number of trainee doctors by 25%. But will it be enough to solve the problems here in the East Midlands, where a shortage of GPs is combining with tight budgets to create a double headache for patients? The news comes as doctors in one part of the region are warning they may have to stop carrying out some routine procedures if they don't get paid for them. Here's Helen McCulloch.
The doctors of the future. But are there enough of them? For many of these students, getting a place at the University of Leicester's medical school is an achievement in itself.
I applied when I was 18, but I didn't get in. So then I applied after my degree. Again, I didn't get in. So then I applied the next year, and then I finally got in. So it's been like a long haul, but then I got there in the end, so it's like yes.
I didn't get in first time, and I had to take a gap year. But in the end, it worked out a lot better for me because I was able to gain a lot more experience.
The government announced this week it would be boosting the number of places at medical schools by 25% in a bid to become self-sufficient, ending the reliance of hiring doctors from abroad.
Whilst we do definitely welcome it, it's going to take about 10 years from now before the new medical students are working as independent practitioners. We have to realise that we're spending a much lower proportion of our national income on our health service than happens in most countries.
Jeremy Hunt's announcement that there'll be more British-trained doctors has been welcomed, though there are some concerns over the costs. GPs in Lincolnshire have already warned they may have to stop some procedures unless they get more funding from NHS bosses.
Well, we currently perform routine ECGs, ear care, 24-hour blood pressure monitoring, all things which have traditionally been done at hospital and which hospitals are still funded to perform, and general practice is not funded to perform those services. whilst we're finding it difficult to provide safe care to our patients for the things we have to do, we will have to stop at some point doing those things which we don't have to do.
Lincolnshire GPs are now in talks with their clinical commissioning group to get paid for the services that they carry out for free. And there is sympathy from the CCGs, who recognise that money is tight.
We are still having so much cuts, but there are no huge increases in the NHS budget to be able to allow for the increased demand on services. And pressure on general practice and all of the NHS is very tight. Some practices are really struggling with the amount of resource they're being allocated to look after the patients, in keeping with the increasing demand of the patients and difficulty recruiting.
With a shortage of GPs and a shortage of cash, it's more pressure on our doctors and their patients.
So this works out at around 1,500 new places at medical schools from about 2018, and that is for the whole country, Mark, and not all of those students, as we know, will end up staying in the NHS or being doctors.
Well, we're going from 6,000 to about 7,500 per year. And actually there is an obligation on those extra students to stay within the NHS for a period of time after they finish their training. I think this is a really good news story that we're clearly committing to the NHS for the long term, and you have to recognise that the NHS's greatest asset is its staff and its people, and I think this is a really good news story coming from the government.
Well, we heard there, didn't we, the Dean of the Med School at Leicester University saying that it takes around 10 years for students to become independent practitioners. That's an awful long time to wait when we need them now.
Yeah, and of course there are those pressures within the NHS at the moment, something the government recognises, but I think if we can give the opportunity to more very bright people coming through the education system to aspire to be doctors and work within the NHS, that has to be a good thing. And I think extending or getting rid of that restriction on the number of places that we've seen in the past is a good idea.
John Ashworth, what do you think? The government is trying to tackle the problem, wouldn't you say?
Well, I'm glad they recognise it's a problem. I mean, the last general election in 2015, we in the Labour Party said we needed more doctors in our NHS, and one of our big commitments was for more doctors. Of course, David Cameron at the time said it wasn't doable and all the rest of it. So I'm pleased to see that the Conservatives are taking up one of our ideas. But as we saw in the package, we really need these new doctors in our NHS quickly. I mean, so far the government have been cutting student nurses' bursaries, they've been cutting the budgets for the NHS. We've got another £22 billion worth of cuts to come to the NHS, and at the Tory conference this week they're saying to sort of doctors from the EU who are saving British lives, oh, pack your bags in a couple of years' time. So, great that they're now getting on with it, but I wish they'd got on with it sooner.
That simply isn't true. I mean, actually, at the last general election, the Conservative Party said to the NHS, how much cash do you need? The NHS said we needed £8 billion extra. We're going to deliver £10 billion by the end of this Parliament. We were the only political party to commit that extra cash, and we were only able to do that because of the efficient running of the economy. And I think it's all right to talk about what you would do and how you would do it, but unless you run the economy properly, you haven't got the cash to deliver to the NHS, which both of our constituents desperately want to
as
succeed.
Shadow Health Secretary as you now are, this is going to be a priority for you.
Well, it's going to be a big issue, and I think there's a lot for the Labour Party campaigning on the NHS. I mean, I think the NHS is on the brink of crisis. We've got so many trusts in deficit, we've got people leaving the NHS, we've got waiting times going up, and Jeremy Corbyn on Friday offered me the role of Shadow Health Secretary. I agreed with him that it's a big campaigning job of work for the Labour Party, so I've taken that up, and I'll be exploiting some of these issues that which the Tories are making mistakes on over the next few weeks.
Well, looking at the issues that we have been in our programme, Lincolnshire GPs saying that hospitals are funded for those services they have to do for free. Maybe we need to be using our resources better, differently. What do you think?
Well, of course, if there's better ways to use resources, we should always look at that. But the government have said the NHS have got to find £22 billion worth of efficiencies, and there's a lot of people thinking that they can't do that simply from savings on paper clips. It's going to come down to cutting services, and that's a big challenge for the NHS and a big challenge for the Tory government to over the next few weeks and months.
Actually, it's not just about cash. This is about the way in which the health service interacts with adult social care. And we've got to get that balance right to make sure those people who find themselves in a position where they're stuck in a hospital bed have got an ability to move into adult social care, because it saves the taxpayer money. It's better for the patient.
Everyone agrees with that.
So
but Eric Pickles cut the social care budgets at local councils had to spend. So, you talk about social care, it's been decimated.
But, looking ahead, we're talking about getting new doctors and more places on medical school courses too. But right now, we've got this problem and it's a mess, isn't it? Look at those GPs in Lincolnshire saying that they're going to have to cut certain services.
Of course.
Monitoring of blood pressure. It's really important stuff.
Of course there's pressure. There's always pressure in the NHS, and we need to make sure we're funding that properly, which is what the government is doing. I mean, locally, actually, we've seen the recruitment of extra nurses within the Nottingham Healthcare Trust. So there is progress being made.
But it comes to something, doesn't it, when GPs say they're going to have to cut some services completely because there isn't the funding there?
Well, I think particularly in the East Midlands, we do find ourselves struggling to recruit GPs, and I think locally we need to look at how we encourage GPs to come to the East Midlands. There is pressure within the East Midlands, but I think the only way you can support the NHS is by running the economy properly and making sure you've got that cash available to fund it, which is what the government's been doing and committing to do for the long term.
Mark's absolutely right on that. See, I'm not always partisan. I mean, in Leicester we've had an issue trying to persuade GPs to come to Leicester, and one of the things the City Council did recently was come to Leicester because we've got a Premier League Championship football in Leicester. So
you've got to seize the day, haven't you?
You've got to use every lever at our disposal. We've got to pull.
But it is a real problem in Leicester too, as well.
Yeah, it is a problem in Leicester.
Attracting doctors to the East Midlands is particularly a problem, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we've got to work on that, definitely.
And it's not something you can blame the government on entirely, is it? The problems in the NHS are caused by our growing elderly population as well, aren't they?
Well, I can blame the government about the cuts to social care, but the specific issue about trying to recruit people in the East Midlands, I think that is something that all of us in politics and public service interested in these issues can work together on.
OK, thank you very much. Time now for a roundup of some of the other political stories from the East Midlands this week. Here's our political editor, Tony Rowe, with 60 seconds.
Works begun in Nottingham on the first electric vehicle-only road lane in England. The Eco Expressway will be a 6-mile route into the city from Colwick. The £6 million project will also have a cycle lane and a lane for conventional traffic. Meanwhile, it's back to the future in Leicester, where 6 rival plans have been unveiled for a new heritage railway museum. The £18 million project will be based at the Leicester North Station, part of the Great Central Railway. A new site on Loughborough University's Science and Enterprise Park has almost filled up, just 1 year after opening. The university says some companies at the park have quadrupled in size, and it's seen a 30% increase in businesses moving there. New research has found that Nottingham and Leicester have 2 of the fastest growing school populations in the country. The 2 cities will need another 40 new schools in the next 4 years to cope, according to the public sector body SCAPE.
And that is the Sunday Politics here in the East Midlands. Our thanks to John Ashworth and Mark Spencer for being this week's guests. Next week, David Tredinnick and Toby Perkins will be joining us here in the studio. Time, though, to hand you back to Andrew Neil.